Hey folks, I am Jeff. This is Tabletop
Toolbox. In this 41st episode of the weekly Ratchet, I will be showing you the ins, the outs, the ups, and the downs of what it takes to make an episode of what maybe could be one day the greatest board game variety show to ever grace the internet. Sure, why not?
Hey there everyone, welcome back to the weekly Ratchet.
Yes, welcome indeed to this special celebratory episode of the weekly Ratchet, celebrating 1,000 subscribers to the channel. I wanted to take this moment to kind of show you a little bit truly behind the scenes of what it takes to make this mostly weekly board game themed variety show. This was inspired by the late night talk shows like Stephen Colbert and Conan O'Brien, and I wanted to have the conversation that I've often had here at this table with friends and sometimes family after we finished playing a game, and we're just sitting there talking about the experience. What do we like? What do we not like? What did it remind us of? What would it be neat if it did something different? Or even looking around this room and talking about the games that we haven't gotten to play or haven't played recently. My friends say, oh, wait, what's that game? What's it about? Just that conversation has always been a lot of fun for me. Sometimes more fun than the game that we just got done playing. And I wanted to figure out a way to keep that conversation going. It was also inspired by a conversation that I had very briefly at PAX Unplugged in 2023. I ran into a friend there, and he introduced me to a friend of his and said, well, this is Jeff. He does videos on the Dice Tower. He also has his own channel, but he doesn't really do anything with it. And that kind of stung. I thought, maybe I need to do something about that. And so the idea came about to try and come up with a show that was entertaining, that let me have that conversation, to just chat casually about games. And I wanted it to be casual. I didn't want it to be scripted or have lavish productions. I could not take a week to put out a weekly show, or it would simply never happen. I wanted to work on my ability to improvise, just be able to sort of speak off the cuff. And if I make a gaffe, maybe no big deal, laugh it off and keep going. And of course, I wanted to trigger the YouTube algorithm a little bit to start bringing some more viewers into the show. I had maybe a few hundred subscribers at the time that I started the Weekly Ratchet, and now here we are at 1,000. So I'm going to take this opportunity to show you what happens here.
What happens here?
What happens here? And show you what it takes to make the Weekly Ratchet the show that it is. So, hey,
Get into what?
you're going to have to start over again. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start this over again. Welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet, folks. Possibly the most scripted episode of the Weekly Ratchet you will ever see. I'm looking forward to this episode. I've got some fun stuff planned for you, and I hope I can pull it all off. Of course, the way that this is going to work, I'm filming this probably several days before you will get to see it, just because I know I have a lot of editing ahead of me, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the editing process through this video here at my editing / work from home / hang out with a cat desk. I was going to show you a little bit of a prep video, how I put together an episode of the show, but honestly, it's not that involved of a process. I pull up a Word document, I pull up last week's episode on YouTube, paraphrase questions of the week, pull up BGG to capture recently played games, and of course try to keep track of things that have come in. I used to script sort of the opening segment just between the very beginning of the video and the music kick in. I quit doing that as well, kind of wanted to keep things just quick and upbeat, and again, working on that whole improv thing. I will tell you real quick too that the music is from the Infraction channel, a no copyright, no royalty channel out here on YouTube. I think the guy just loves making music, and in fact, I've tried reaching out to him to see if I could commission some work for the channel, and he's never even responded, but I do really like his music. Anyways, I know I've got quite a bit of editing ahead of me, and that's okay. Like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing how this all plays out. Obviously, the holidays are in full swing here in Virginia, as I'm sure they are all across the globe. The tree is lit up with glee behind me. I love the colored lights of the holiday season. I'll see if I can throw a shot of the front of our house in here, as I just really love decorating our place up for the holidays. Other than that, not really too much else going on. We had a great weekend of playing games just a few days ago, and I'm going to tell you all about it here in a little bit. And lots of other stuff planned. Let's go ahead and get to some new games.
Honestly, this wasn't how I wanted to start off this show. I really wanted to be able to do some sort of a news segment where I talked about, announced games or announced projects, maybe interactions or movements between various studios, publishers, designers, whatever it may be. But again, as a one-man band, compiling all that information, absorbing it all, getting screenshots, whatever, was just going to be too much work. In fact, even the Dice Tower, their news segments, they have a whole group that does just that. They collect that information and more or less send it in. And I even thought about trying to tap into that, but I wasn't sure if there was a cost involved, and I didn't really want to find out. Plus, I didn't want to just be sharing the same news that they share. There's not a lot of point in that. Anyways, so the idea then came to talk about, well, what's new here? What's coming here that I can share just with this audience? And that's worked fairly well. It's also had the added benefit of me sort of realizing, hey, here's this game I got, and I'm sure you're going to want to know more about it, so I better hurry up and get it played so I can talk about it in more detail in a later show. And that's been pretty beneficial. It hasn't always worked. There have been some stuff I've forgotten. There have been some things that have kind of gotten misplaced and I forgot to mention, and sometimes that bites. This is from All Play, and I picked this up at PAX Unplugged just the other weekend. I forgot to mention it because it was the last game I bought on my way out the door. I tossed it in the backseat of my car, threw my coat on top of it, and then promptly forgot about it. I don't know a whole lot about this. The designers are Bridget and Wolfgang Ditt, if you did not know that. This is a family weight game where something about ants trying to collect food from a picnic, and there's a sort of a 3D ant hill element into it, but I don't really know anything else beyond that. The main reason I got this is that at the Dice Tower retreat a few months ago, I picked up what I thought was the game off of that game trade table, and I realized when I got home that no, it was just an expansion and some promo content, not the actual game. And I thought, well, great, now I got to go and get the game. Of course, I could have probably just gotten rid of that content or that stuff, but I know it's a little easier to do that if you kind of have everything all together. So I went ahead and I picked up a game. I thought we'd play it. Maybe if it's nice, I'll throw it at the cabin, let it sit there and get some plays. And if not, I can, of course, just kind of trade it or sell it as all one piece. So that is Bites from All Play. Alrighty. This is our official dining room. Now, we don't really use it. That's why it's kind of a mess, and also why I've decided not to light it all that well so you can't see that mess. But anyways, behind me is this little table where things, well, they kind of go to die. You see, when I get games in via the mail, sometimes they'll get stacked up here for a little bit. Maybe I want to get through the rule books or maybe get them punched. Maybe we're trying to get them played here at the house in the next couple of nights. And so they just kind of tend to sit here, and sometimes they get forgotten. In fact, if you look under this stack of boxes I'm holding on to, you'll find a copy of Sniper Elite. This is a hidden movement game based on the very popular video game series of Sniper Elite. And again, I got this quite a while ago. I actually believe it was several months ago. I was down at the one game store in Midlothian, Virginia, maybe about 40 minutes from here. I believe that's when I was at the Unplugged or Unpub event, meeting up with some friends and playing some unpublished games. And I picked this up and then just immediately forgot about it. This was a Kickstarter that I did not get involved with because the hidden movement games just don't really, you need bigger groups to play those with, and I just really never get to do that. And so I kind of avoided it, but I've heard a lot of really good things about it, including the solo mode. And of course, I keep telling myself that, oh, I can play these games solo, even though I hardly ever do. But I've heard a lot of good things about this, and I do want to try and check it out. Maybe at some point I can try and go and get the rest of the stuff for this game, if I ever get it out of shrink. Anyways, this is Sniper Elite, and that is all for new games here to the Treehouse. Let's go ahead and get to Question of the Week. All right, folks, time for Question of the Week. Now, this one has been floating. Question of the Week. I think arguably the favorite part of this show from the perspective of the audience. And I'm just basing that on some feedback that I've had, some statistics and data coming out of YouTube makes it fairly evident that this is the part of the show that people enjoy the most. And again, the whole idea of it was, let's carry on a conversation. I couldn't exactly tell you how I landed on this idea. You know, the consequence of being a one-man band means that it just kind of popped into my head at some point, and I thought that is probably the solution. Instead of being able to sit here and talk to someone about a game that we've played, you know, let's make it maybe some broader topics, because of course I can't talk to you about a game that I've played because maybe you haven't played it. But anyways, it I think solved the problem of how do I make this a conversation and not just me constantly spewing stuff at you for a half hour or so each day. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, I asked you to share with me your favorite gaming experience of 2024, and then I did add that you could send me a photo or something to sort of commemorate that event. I only got a few photos sent to me, but that's okay. I also have a couple of questions to get through. Let me go ahead and get to those now. Up first is arguably the longest segment of the Weekly Ratchet to put together is Question of the Week. Obviously, I have to go through the previous video and grab answers, and in this instance, I asked this question over 2 episodes and a post, and I got at least one email in, so I've got to collect all of that. I'll usually sort of paraphrase those answers into my show notes, and I had to get a little better at this as the show went on, trying to make sure that I was capturing really the full essence of what people are writing. Sometimes I paraphrased a little too much. I kind of condensed it too much. So I've tried to improve that a little bit, but then I'll go in after I've done that recording. I'll copy the actual text that was written, paste it into my video editor, which is DaVinci Resolve Studio version. And again, this is a process I've improved a good bit. So at first I just had a text box and a black background and a colored border. I did make the sort of antenna radiating thing. I designed that all myself, which was a lot of fun to do. But just the process of getting all this plugged in used to take a lot of work, and I finally did learn how to come in here and make things a little organized so I can quickly change the border color, I can quickly add my text, and I even was able to figure out how to sort of link a lot of these elements together. So for example, when some folks like to write the longer answers, I can grab this little border and just real quickly resize this box to capture everything in. So let me go ahead and catch the first edit here of the question of the week. And CR Poll always gets the green border. Up first is CR Poll, who said, "This is easy, the Weekly Ratchet arrival." I've said this before and I will say it again, flattery will get you pretty much everywhere on this channel. Thank you for that. I do appreciate it. Wonder Flonium said his favorite experience was getting to playtest a game, adding that getting to provide feedback that the publisher incorporated into the game made the experience that much better. Well, now I'm kind of curious to know what that game is. That certainly sounds pretty neat. And I do know that feeling. I've gotten to chat with a couple of publishers, especially doing this, these videos and the Kickstarter content and such. I don't know that I've had a lot of influence on game design, but it has just been neat getting to chat with designers and sort of share some ideas and that kind of a thing. Teshera said 2024 has been a great year in general for getting to experience co-op gaming with his wife, and listed a ton of games he's enjoyed, including Unsettled and Dwarf Romantic. That is very, very cool. Co-op games don't always jive with my wife and I, but we've certainly had some fun with them as well, and I'm really glad that you've got to have that experience. I'm still wondering if Dwarf Romantic is the right game for my wife and I. I know it's very light, but I also know that it's very non-confrontational, even in the players versus the game. I really do need to try and check that out. I just hope it's not too light for my wife to enjoy, which is kind of funny to say that sometimes, but she actually likes some of the harder games. Josh Knight said that his favorite moment was going to Origins for the first time and getting to play with friends that traveled from Michigan and Ohio. That is awesome, Josh. I'm glad you got to have that experience. I have never been to Origins. I really do need to go and check that out, and I certainly know that fun of getting to a con for the first time, so I'm really glad you got to do that. Tony Lawhorn said that at Gen Con this year, he pitched some ideas to a publisher and within a few weeks had a contract to develop a new game. What? Dude, that is awesome. That is really, really cool. I was not expecting to read that in the comments. You and I met at Gen Con last year and we had a good time hanging out, but we haven't really gotten to just socialize or get to know each other very well. I didn't know that you design games. In fact, I think you said in the comments that you don't really design games, but you had some ideas. But that's really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to learning more about that. And of course, if, Tabletop Toolbox can help in any promotional content, have your people call my people. I'll share my number. Anyways, Jeremy Brooks shared a heart-wrenching but wonderful story of getting to play Dark Tower with his best friend of 40 years and that gentleman's wife who had been diagnosed with brain cancer. They spent hours together playing and had a great day, and 4 weeks later the wife lost her battle to cancer. Jeremy said he was so glad to get to have that last game day and that he would cherish that memory forever. Definitely a heartwarming story, a very bittersweet, sad story. I'm glad you got to make that memory, and my condolences to your friend. I hope he is able to find peace. Going to try and move on from that to Penny, who said her favorite moment was playing Dune War for Arrakis with her husband, that it took a while to set up and learn, but that they just had so much fun playing. Sometimes a gun... Crap. I don't know why I had so much trouble with the question of the week this week. I actually had a lot of gaffes and mess ups in this. I think my mind was just in a lot of different places, but that's okay, because now you can see how I fix this. Penny, who said her favorite moment was playing Dune War for Arrakis with her husband, that it took Penny said her favorite moment was playing Dune War for Arrakis with her husband, that it took War for Arrakis with her husband, that it War for Arrakis with her husband, that it took War for Arrakis with her husband, that it took a while to set up and learn, but that they just had so much fun playing. I agree, sometimes a game is just... Perfect. I agree, sometimes a game is just so much fun to play that no matter what it takes to get into it, you end up having such a good time that it all makes it worth it in the end. I'm glad you got to play that. Okay, so the last thing here is I asked folks to send in some photos, correlate with their favorite moments. The last 2 submittals did. I'm going to try and figure out how to work those into this, make it sort of look like it belongs. Well, let's see what happens. Tom, you sent me pictures of different resolutions. What are you doing to me? Let's see how this looks. I'm glad you got to play that. Tom Moss of Michigan emailed me these photos of him getting to meet Elizabeth Hargrave and Matt Leacock at the Origins Convention in Ohio this year. He said he got to tell Matt about some fun moments with Pandemic Legacy Season 0, which has become his favorite cooperative game. That's really cool, Tom. Glad you got to meet those folks. I'd like to meet Elizabeth. She seems pretty cool. I'm not really big in the pandemic stuff, but certainly it is nice to get to meet some designers and just have nice conversations with them about their games. And lastly, Greg Bowerly of the Meeple Society sent in this picture of when we played London Cabbie at my cabin, and he was forcing Katie's cab to go as slow as he possibly could. That was a lot of fun. That was a very, very fun experience. At first, I wasn't really loving that game, but I kind of feel like the three of us made it a little bit more than what it could have just been on its own. The three of us just sort of made that a very silly and fun gaming experience. And honestly, if I had to pick a favorite gaming moment from 2024, and there have been a handful of them, definitely just getting this show going and sort of making it what it is has been a lot of fun. But the three of us, Katie, Greg, and I, playing a little miniature cabin con at our cabin in Shenandoah was a ton of fun. Not even as much fun, I think, as sitting here and doing a weekly Ratchet episode about it the weekend after. We spent an hour getting the lights and all the different cameras set up, working through tech support issues, and just having tons and tons of problems, and then finally just going,
Okay, here we go. Let's do it. That was a really, really fun episode to put together, and I just had a lot of fun with that entire week and weekend, getting to play games and then sort of summarizing it all up with the Ratchet. That was a lot of fun. I have no idea what the question's going to be for next week. Yeah, I often get to this point in the video and then realize that I have not planned a question of the week for the next week, and it's sometimes kind of a last minute, oh crap. And actually, come to think about it, this will probably go out the weekend before Christmas. We, of course, then have Christmas, and we will be traveling the rest of that week and weekend visiting family who does not play games. So I probably won't get to play much over the Christmas week. And then we're back in time for New Year's, hopefully meeting up with some friends. Might get a game or two in, but I'm not too optimistic about it. So maybe a couple of weeks before the next Ratchet episode comes out. So on that note, I'd actually love to know what games you folks are looking forward to playing or seeing or buying in 2025. It could be an upcoming Kickstarter, maybe something even that's coming out right now that you're just anxious to get your hands on. I don't want to necessarily push Cult of the New. I know there's a lot of folks here who like older or classic games, but maybe there's something that you've caught wind of and you're interested in checking it out. Go ahead and let me know in the comments. That might just be our first question of the week for 2025. This arguably is my favorite part of the show. As someone who sort of made it his goal in the hobby, really, to talk about games, right? I had this idea years ago that, hey, I should try some video content creation. It looks fun. I think I could be pretty decent at it. And I just love to talk about games. It's that idea of this conversation. And of course, it's a little difficult because you may not have played these games. And you certainly didn't play the game with me. Actually, some of you have, come to think of it. But still, I had to make this a little bit more one-sided than I really would like it to be. But it's the nature of a YouTube show. Still, the fact that I get to just talk about these games, the fact that I can do it without that lavish production, this has actually helped me work on the ability to sort of improv. I've actually gotten pretty good at doing work meetings because of this show. It has helped me to think a little bit more on the fly. It has helped me to, again, talk about a game without a long script or hours of B-roll filming. I spend hours doing B-roll footage, often on this table, for some of the videos that you've seen. And I couldn't do that. So I had to improve the process. I had to sort of work on some internal skills. And I feel like it's gotten pretty good. Sometimes I ramble a little too much still, but usually that's a game that I've spent a lot of time either playing or a lot of time thinking about. And, it's sort of brought me more to think and to share. But anyways, all of that's why I like this segment quite a bit. Got a couple things to run through, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm going to start off first real quick with this game of Taxi. I mentioned a few episodes when this came in. This is a Kickstarter prototype that I've been asked to take a look at, maybe put a video together for. This is from Mark Miller, and the company is Blue Token Games. I tried looking them up online. They've got just a couple little things mentioned there. This was a super, super, super lightweight little game about trying to sort of create a route. There's a little bit of a sort of tableau or city building aspect to it, but like I said, very, very light. Basically, each player gets a fare card at the beginning of the game, and then it will show two locations, like the grocery store and the library. And when those two locations sort of appear on the map and have a route connected between the two, you have to wait one turn, and then you can sort of collect your fare and win the game. Very, very simple. You're putting out these cards, kind of Carcassonne style, with just different road segments on them, but there are a bunch of different cards in the deck that may bring out blockades, or you may get one-way streets that sort of limit the direction that you can travel in. You may get various things that just kind of hamper someone's effort to try and connect that route. Those locations themselves are also cards in that deck. They get shuffled into the top half of that deck. And when they come out, they have to get played, but they have to get played by someone who doesn't have that location on their fair cards. So you basically have to find out who at the table doesn't have it, give it to them, they get to place that so that they don't have a vested interest necessarily in where it goes.
And I think all of that is supposed to make this a bit more of an evolved game. It says it's ages 13 up, says it's 30 to 90 minutes. I think we wrapped it up in about 15 minutes. And my almost 12-year-old daughter was kind of bored of it, if I'm honest. I messaged Mark and I kind of said, hey, yeah, the game is fine. There's nothing wrong with the game. But I did feel like it was a little too light for that family weight. I think of games like Project L or Flamecraft. It was too light for that crowd. Again, my daughter was just kind of like, yeah, I'm good, I'm done. But it was I think it would be too hard for, say, an 8-year-old and especially younger, as there's a lot of reading on some of these cards. Now, if you kind of left out some of the take that stuff, a kid would have no problem with it, but that would make it even easier because there'd be less to slow somebody down. We found that as you were building these tiles, as you're putting the roads out, they have to connect to another road. And so you can't create dead ends. You can't make it impossible to get from one area to another. Basically, our entire city was connected, as a city should be, if we're being honest. But there was nowhere that you could put a location that it wouldn't be connected to another location. So it really just came down to who was the first player who had both of their locations show up in that deck. And, then you just kind of had to hope that you could block them long enough to get your own locations out. I got the first route set up. My wife got a card to let her block me. On my next turn, I managed to draw just the card I needed to remove the blockage. That sounds weird. Anyways, and then on my next turn, I won the game. And the other thing that was weird was that there's no taxis. You don't actually have a taxi in this game. You're not moving around this city. You just have to have those two locations established and have a active route between them to win. So I mean, like I said, it was cute. It was fine. I almost think it needs to have less text so it can hit a target audience, or else it needs to be a good bit more interesting for this target audience. But anyways, that was Taxi, the game of fair play. All right, so last weekend we were supposed to go to the cabin. We had plans to go to our cabin, just kind of hang out for a weekend. I was kind of excited because it was the first weekend that I didn't have any work to do at the cabin. Nothing is broken, nothing needs fixed, and everything's going fine. Anyways, my wife got sick and wasn't feeling too well, late last half of last week. So we ended up not going. She was feeling better by Saturday, and she said, what, let's just play games today. Let's kind of do a cabin stay, but here. And I was like, okay, we'll see how long this lasts. We played a ton of games. Oh my goodness, I played more games with my wife in a single day than I've ever played before, ever. And I had a blast, and I really appreciate her sort of making all that happen. Anyways, here we go. The first game was Compile. You're going to see a lot of the PAX Unplugged haul in this segment. Compile is a 2-player very tactical card-playing game where you are you're supposed to be like an artificial intelligence. You're an AI who's trying to compile 3 different protocols of code. I keep calling them categories or topics. They're protocols in the game. And those protocols might be, let me see, we had metal, gravity, light, spirit, water, and I can't remember what the 6th one was. Each player gets 3. You lay them out on this nice mat that I got, and then you're playing cards of that protocol to that protocol, trying to get a total of 10 points in that column on your side. And the first player to do so in each column of cards, including their opponents, compiles their code. All the cards in that line on both sides for both players get discarded. The player who compiled flips their compile card or their protocol card over, and the first to get 3 of their cards compiled wins the game. And my wife won on this one, and it was really kind of interesting because we kind of ran into a moment where she had enough points, and I was like, well, there's nothing I can do to stop her. I couldn't compile something in that same turn. You can try to exceed, if you have more value in your code than they do, they can't compile. So if she had 10, I had 11, she would not be able to compile, and I could potentially do so on my next turn. And I couldn't stop her. But I played a card that forced her to flip over the top card of that stack. You can play your cards face up or face down, and I'm not going to get heavy deep into the rules, or we could be here for a while. And that card said to rearrange her protocol, so she would have to reorganize, and that was the only one that she had left to compile. So if she had to relocate all 3 of her protocols, she would be forced to basically compile the code she had already compiled, which would hurt me just a little bit, but it would set her all the way back as far as trying to win the game with that last code.
But I couldn't find any answers in the text to say, well, do you have to rearrange all the protocols or just 2 of them, whatever. We actually reached out to the designer. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. And he actually responded fairly quick on BGG and said that no, as long as you just change 2 of them, that would meet the requirements of that action. So she could have flipped the 2 that she already had compiled and she would have won the game. So I was really, really happy for her that she won that one. This is a really, really neat game. I could see it getting a little mean because even as it was, we kind of played an easier version where you don't rearrange those cards that much. If you play the full version, you could be potentially rearranging those protocols quite a lot. And I think it would just make this game really bogged down, really, really complicated, and probably frustrating if it started to drag out for a little too long. We might just kind of always stick with that slightly easier mode. But I did have a lot of fun with this. The cards look amazing. This really neat hologram effect, but only in the borders around the text. Just makes them look like illuminated displays. It was pretty neat compile. Up next, we played Windmill Valley from Board and Dice. I mentioned this one, I believe, in the last episode. I played this at the retreat. Ended up liking it. Went ahead and got my own copy just before PAX Unplugged. And we played this. Now, I had also played it solo just a couple nights before. A lot of these pictures are taken here, by the way, where we actually do our dining, and also a lot of our late night games are played at this table, but it's a very warm white type of space. So usually when I go to edit these photos, I have to change the tone of these images and play with the contrast a bit to make them look a little bit better on YouTube. To really just kind of check out the solo mode, but then also to kind of refamiliarize myself with the rules, because this one is still fairly abstract, which is kind of in line with some of these Board and Dice games. But it is just a really, really neat presentation. It's a pretty interesting puzzle. It's got this gimmick of spinning these gears to take your actions. As I was teaching my wife this game, I kept saying, there's not that much more. There's not that much more. And then here's like 3 more things I got to explain to you. But she did get the hang of it. She didn't really like the market in the middle of the board, which is kind of a key element. She was really having a hard time kind of understanding that. She was doing fairly well, and I really felt like I was dragging for a bit, but I did pick up my stride, and I ended up with a really, really high score in this game. And she did enjoy it. I don't know that it's something that we'll get back to the table fairly often. I do like this. Again, a little bit more abstract than what I would normally go for, but I think of all the Board and Dice games, this one doesn't have any dice in it, which kind of makes it a win for me right away. Beautiful presentation, and just a fun, engaging puzzle that keeps you looking at different ways to try and get things done. A little bit of a combo effect that you can generate from time to time. Just a neat game, Windmill Valley. Okay, up next. No, not that one. This one. Looking forward to talking about this one. This is Fromage by Ben Rossett. Ben Rossett, and I think I mentioned this, I don't remember if it was in my Dice Tower top 10. No, I don't think so. I think I just mentioned this in the Ratchet last week, was that when this game came to Kickstarter, I kind of felt like I had been burned by Ben a couple of times already. His Homebrewers game was a real letdown. The Search for Planet X, or Extra Life, whatever the heck that game is called, I just didn't really care for. Well, I didn't play the second one. Planet X just didn't really do it for me. And so I didn't jump on this. But I saw it at PAX. I had been hearing kind of some rumblings of it. I went ahead and I picked it up. And this game's actually pretty decent. This game is quite decent. You have this sort of a cheese wheel. It's not really a cheese wheel. It's just a round board in front of you. And with this being the limited edition, there's kind of a mat that it spins on, keeps it under control. And you're playing workers out to these indented spots on these boards. Each one of these 4 boards kind of works like a mini game. So you have one that's kind of like an area control. You have one that is a sort of like trying to fill in a grid, trying to get as many connected spaces. You've got one that is a sort of like a market. There's these tables. So you're basically like a cafe, a bistro. You're serving people cheeses, and you're trying to get all of your pieces on a single table, and that lets you increase the score of where every piece is sitting on that board. And then you have another one that's just trying to get as many pieces onto different areas of the board as you can. In the middle of these 4 sections is sort of a resource station where you can go on each one of your turns. You can put a worker there to get one of the 4 resources of the game. You have order cards, you've got cattle, you've got fruit, and you've got buildings. And you can be placing these buildings out on your board to basically placing these buildings out on your You can be placing these buildings out on your board to basically unlock new abilities. We're sort of onto the fruit lets you buildings. You can be placing these buildings out on your board to basically unlock new abilities or sort of enhance some actions or some of the boards that you'll be playing onto. The fruit lets you build kind of like specialty cheeses or make specialty cheeses. It really just kind of helps you get some extra points. And then the cattle actually gives you these free actions that you can trigger just a couple of times throughout the game. And all of it has this timing element in that there's blue cheese, soft cheese, and hard cheese. You have 3 workers, one that makes each type of cheese. But then there are also bronze, silver, and gold action locations on the board. And so that gives you, 9 different configurations of cheeses that you can make. And each of that gold, bronze, and silver is kind of like supposed to be an age, right? So the bronze or copper, whatever it is a 1 month, silver is a 2 month, and gold is a 3 month. And what that means is that the board spins at the end of each sort of round, and the worker has to stay on that board for the number of months or rotations equal to the age of that cheese. So if you put out if you take a gold action, that worker will be facing to your left, and then it'll spin face away, it'll spin and face to your right, it'll spin again and face you, and whenever your workers are facing you, that's when you get to take them back. You only have 3 workers. So this whole game is about managing this very, very small crew, trying to get the things that you need to do, trying to fulfill these orders, trying to sort of win maybe 2 of these mini games out on the board, trying to get the resources that you need, and doing all this with this timing of, okay, in another month I need to get this done, which means I better not have that worker on a gold action over here. And just managing all of that is quite a challenge. I was really, really surprised with my first play of this. We played it again over this weekend, and actually brought my daughter into the game. It's not her theme, obviously, but even she had a pretty good time with it. She didn't win. She was a good bit behind us, but she did okay. She didn't need a whole lot of coaching. She was kind of able to understand that challenge at least a little bit and did have a pretty good time with it. Neat game. And I really like this because it is thinky. Your head kind of hurts a little bit as you're getting into it, but it's like an hour, maybe an hour and 15 if you're a little AP or kind of taking your time. I was kind of getting extra calculative and trying to think, okay, if I put this worker here, I'm going to get an extra 4 points, but if I wait and I put them over there, I can get 8 points. Okay, yeah, I'll wait and I'll put it over there. And that's fine. That's certainly, if you want to play that way, you can, but it might really bog the game down just a little bit. Anyways, neat experience. Fromage. We then played one other game. Or was this the last game of that night? What did I mention here already? I mentioned... This is fun, isn't it? Fromage and Campari. Yeah. This is the 4th one. Okay, sorry. The last game that we played was Polynesia. I mentioned this from the Dice Tower Retreat episode. I think that was 29. I've always just kind of had an eye for this game. It is a pretty box, and I've seen it in stores. I'd heard that it was not a very good 2-player game. I was able to get it at the trade at the Dice Tower Retreat, and my wife was like, "Okay, let's get one more game." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? It's like 9 o'clock at night." "Oh no, it'll be fine." And so I came up here and I saw this on the shelf, and I thought, "Hey, daughter doesn't have to go to bed. It's Saturday night. Let's play Polynesia." This game is a little interesting. It's a little weird. The whole idea is that you're all living on this island and a volcano is about to erupt and it's going to wipe out the island and the 3 neighboring islands. And you have to explore routes to new islands following pre-existing lines on the board, which is kind of interesting. But once you explore that route then becomes available for other players to explore, or they can even use your route. They can kind of pay you to have you take them along the route that you discovered. And all of it so you can just get off of these danger islands, get to safer ground. And then there's a couple different ways to get points, including 3 cards that are randomly picked at the beginning of the game, and each one sets up either a triggerable event in the game, which honestly we didn't see any of those, or they set up in-game scoring. And what was kind of interesting is that you're pulling these cubes out of a bag, and when you get the 6th red cube, the volcano erupts and the game ends. So you have no idea how long the game is going to last. There's 1 black cube that makes you pull 2 more cubes, and there's 3 gray cubes that act as a nothing. Nothing happens. We pulled 4 reds in a row, then my wife pulled the black,
and pulled the 2 reds on the same turn. So we basically had the shortest possible game you could possibly have. And I imagine the lowest scores you could possibly have, because I think I had 5 points, I think my wife had 4 points, and my daughter had 7 points because she saved the least people, but one of the endgame cards said, get 3 points if you have the most people still on your board, which basically means they all died. And she did. So my wife and I picked up just a couple of points from things in the game, but my daughter actually got a bunch of extra points for killing the most people, and she won. It was bizarre. It was such a weird game, but we did kind of like it. It was very, very pretty on the table. My daughter was really tired with that point. She was like, whatever, I'm going to bed. But I do think we're going to try and get this one played again. I can see it being better at 3 at least than at 2. I'm really glad that we finally got to check this one out. Polynesia, and this is by, who is this by? Luda Nova. Designer is Pierre Sylvester. Anyways, Polynesia. It's a 2020 game, in case you're wondering. Okay. Let me check my list, make sure I'm not missing anything, and I'm not editing all this out, because that's what we're doing in this episode. Okay, over Sunday, we only got a chance to play 1 game. My wife wanted to get a couple more in, but this one took forever. Folks, we played Seti. This was actually the second time I played it. I played it Thursday, the week prior, with Daniel. Daniel and I played this first, helping get a good understanding of it, and then I taught it to my wife, and we played it on Sunday. I can't go into all the rules of this. There's just too much here. But the idea is that you are trying to scan our solar system and sort of the fringes beyond our solar system into the Milky Way galaxy to find data. The data goes onto a computer. You can trigger an action with that computer. If you fully scan an area, you get another sort of a bonus reward. And if you start landing probes on various planets in our solar system, you get other sets of data. And these 3 sets, there's basically a purple and a yellow and a blue. Your supercomputer triggers a blue, landing on planets triggers a yellow, and scanning the systems triggers the purple. And when you get those sets sort of put together, you're lending this data to discovering extraterrestrial intelligence. There are 2 of 5 boards that will come out in every game, and each of those boards features a unique sort of an alien life, and they're not super fantastical. There's no little, gray Martian dudes. It's a bit more realistic, a bit more. And then once these boards kind of get flipped over, they almost add their own little mini game into the rest of the game. They add more decks or an extra deck of cards that you can get. They may add some extra components, some extra things that may trigger. A lot of it kind of hinges upon either score or the movement of these planets in the middle of the solar system. And yes, I had to bling out my sun with a little illuminated light underneath to make it shine out. This was It's a tough game. It's a very, very tight resource game. You only get a couple of resources at the beginning of the game, and you get a few opportunities throughout the game to increase your income. And at the end of each round, after everyone has passed, you play until you just can't go anymore, kind of like Everdell or Arnak, and then you pass. Once everyone passes, you get your income. And like I said, you can kind of augment that income. But at least with the 2 plays that I've had, we haven't gotten to augment it that much. Maybe 3 or 4 new cards added to your income. And it uses these multi-use cards, right? You can discard a card just to get some resources. You can, of course, play them, usually for some pretty powerful actions, although they can be quite expensive. You can tuck those cards to enhance your income. And some of them you can even discard either from the market itself or from your hand to do extra scanning actions around the board. I really, really enjoyed this. It is definitely one of those that, man, you can really just sit there and cook through all of your different options, try and figure out the optimal way to do this. Again, there are some combos you can trigger. In fact, my wife and I, when we were playing this, I got pretty far ahead of her in score. She was really struggling with sort of the, that efficiency. Okay, if I play this card, then I can just do this. But if I play this card first and then maybe do that and use those resources to buy this, well, then I can still play this card and I've done all this other stuff in the meantime. And that was a little difficult for her to wrap her head around. But then at one point she triggered, I think, like 3 major research actions all at the same time. She picked up like 20 points, caught almost right up to me. And even I was like, where did this come from? And it was really awesome. She was really proud of herself. I was really happy for her. I did still end up winning this one. I kind of struggled a little bit mid-game, and then I caught my stride, and I was able to score some big points. But this is a really, really neat game. I need to check this one out solo as well. I've heard some good things about that already. Just a brain-melting, challenging game. I will say that Daniel and I played this for 3 hours, I think, and my wife and I played it for almost like 5, maybe not quite that long, but it really felt like a long time, and that's why that was the only thing that we got to play on Sunday. Seti, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence by CGE, a pretty neat game. Last one on the list, and really there's only one more game that I picked up from PAX that I haven't chatted about yet, and that's Anomia, which is actually still sitting down here. But anyways, this is Ironwood. This is from Mind Clash, and it actually says Mind Clash Play on the front. And I don't know if that's unique, but it is unique in my experience with Mind Clash because this is a fairly approachable, I won't call it lightweight, that'd be a lie, but it's a fairly approachable game from Mind Clash. It's not one of their huge, lavish, overproduced, overwrought types of games that they are known for. And I mentioned this one on the Ratchet, I think last week, that this looks like Root. There's no way to talk about this game without making at least some comparisons to Root. It is a 2-player, again, a very tactical game. This time a little bit more of a dudes on the map, or at least tokens on a map, type game, and you're playing cards to be able to move these guys around, make attacks. One faction plays on the mountaintops and the ridges between those mountaintops. The other faction plays in the woods, and they can kind of cross these little paths across those ridges, but they stay in the forest exclusively, and then you attack the mountains from the forest, and the forest and mountains, so on and so forth. Each player has a different set of goals that are unique, but have some similarities between them. The Ironclad faction is trying to build these foundations on at least 3 of the outer mountains on the outskirts of this board, and then they have to be able to pay crystals to flip those foundation tokens over and build forges. And if they manage to build 3 forges, they immediately win the game. Meanwhile, the Woodwalkers, I don't know why I keep calling them Windwalkers, the Woodwalkers are trying to discover totems on the mountains, all the mountains, any of the mountains of the game. If they discover a totem, they sort of take the totem into the forest that they are in, and then they have to try and move that totem off the board to the outskirts, the outer forest of the board to score it. And when they score their 3rd one, they too would win the game. I played the Woodwalkers. I have not had a chance yet to play this as the Ironclad. I did feel a little bit, and even my wife felt a little bit, and I did find a little bit of commentary out on BGG that seems to feel like the Ironclad faction is a little more flexible. They are able to basically build that foundation and flip it over to a forge all in one round. You get 3 turns per round. Whereas the Woodwalkers, unless they just happen to draw a convenient card, cannot get one of these vision cards that will reveal the mountain that the totems are located. They have to draw that card from a separate deck, a special deck that only they get, tells them which mountain has a totem. They then have to discover that totem from the mountain, which means the mountain can't be occupied. They may have to fight that mountain first. They have to draw the card, clear the mountain, discover the totem, and get it out of there all in one round, and you can't do that, right? And not to mention that once you get that totem, you are a sitting duck for that turn, and you can get attacked. It doesn't destroy the totem, and they can't. The Ironclad can't steal it back from you. But if you can't reorganize quick enough to get more units in there, and then need another turn to get out, eventually after 2 rounds it fades and it disappears. And so it felt as the Woodwalkers that, man, I was really, really under the gun to try and get this done. However, what I did realize was that the Woodwalkers are very nimble. They can move individual units and they can kind of zip all around the forests, whereas the Ironclad has to move their entire sort of armies, and they're called I forgot the name of it. There's a term in the game, but they have to move, again, they're groups. You can't sort of splinter up your groups into smaller, infantry. And they can move those groups around, but I just don't feel like they get as much movement opportunities as the Woodwalkers. And so what I found was that I could kind of pepper my wife's troops, kind of break them up a little bit, maybe force them to retreat and make larger armies. As long as they were on a mountain that I didn't need, I could then run around the forest and grab all the totems I need and get out of there. I was able to be a little bit more flexible than she could, and that sort of was the advantage I started to play to. So she got ahead of me early in the game, but then I got some good cards together, and I did manage to win this. But it was tricky, and I did enjoy the puzzle of it. I did enjoy that. I mean, even my wife at one point, she's like, I can see the smoke coming out of your ears, as I was trying to figure out, okay, well, I can play this card to do this, but it's going to make me trash cards. I really need these cards to be able to do that. So if I don't do that, then what do I do instead? Should I go after that mountain, which is pretty heavily defended, or should I try to get this mountain cleared out, which isn't as heavily defended? Like, just trying to come up with that optimal path. The combat is pretty tricky. It's this slightly more complicated, kind of a rock, paper, scissors, but it's more than that, and I won't go into it. It was a challenge. I do really want to revisit this as the Ironclad. I don't know that I'll get into the solo aspects of this. You can actually play solo on either side. You can play either faction. There's a bot for either of the other two factions. Anyways, this was neat. And I want to dig into it some more. Ironwood by Mind Clash. And I think that's it. There you have it. Episode 41 of the Weekly Ratchet, titled The Weekly Ratchet. I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope, as this is the first thing that I am filming, that I have had fun putting it together. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. Thank you for being a part of this channel. And I hope that you and I and Tabletop Toolbox will all grow together. I'll see you folks again soon. Cheers.